All right, so today what we're going to do is I'm going to recap a little bit about what, the scientific revolution we did last time, and then we're going to move on finally to Descartes, and we're going to cover the first meditation from the textbook, right? Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. So that's the game plan for today. It shouldn't really take that long. We'll probably have a short class anyway. So unfortunately, no one's showing up. And same thing with my last class. No one showed up, man. Geez, I hope it wasn't my stupid, have a good weekend. Okay. Yeah. See you on Tuesday. Yeah. But okay, for next class though, for next class, you need to read the second meditation and get started on the third. So the second meditation will not take us too long to get through, probably an hour maybe of class. So the last 15 or 20 minutes, we'll move on to the third meditation. So I'll go ahead and I'll type that in the chat box. So for next meeting, read meditation 2 and begin meditation 3. Okay, did I spell it right? Okay, good. Okay, so that's for next class. That's for Tuesday. And hopefully by then everybody will have their papers turned in and I'll have all those graded by next week. So we can only hope. All right, so anybody have any questions before I begin? Before we recap last meeting and move on to Descartes? Anyone want to jump in with any questions? Nothing? Okay. Well, if you do, I'm all ears. So let me go. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint that we were looking at last time. It's been a while, right? We haven't met for a week, unfortunately. And you got to forgive me a bit. You notice the background's a little bit different. My office upstairs is totally in shambles. I had people, I had some contractors here last week, and I'm still putting things back in order. I'm a bit beat, so I'm wearing these headphones because it's a bit louder down here than it is up there. And this might just distract me, and I'm just now getting used to it. So hopefully it won't be too much of a problem, but forgive me if I'm a bit jittery. But like I said, we're going to recap very quickly the story so far. This new unit on modern philosophy. We're going to look at Descartes. We're going to recap this, the scientific revolution. And you got this, Professor. Yeah, hopefully. We'll see. And then we'll move on. This will be pretty short. It'll be pretty quick. I think we'll probably get out pretty early today. We'll see, okay? But just to remind us, we're now in the modern period. We're moving on from what is maybe known as the classical period. To some people will call it the ancient period in philosophy. This is, the Greeks, Plato, Aristotle. We're skipping really the medieval period. We didn't do much medieval philosophy, but Descartes is often referred to as the father of modern philosophy. And some people don't like that. I can see why. Maybe it's grandiose of a title. But maybe he does deserve it. As much as I don't like Descartes, there are good reasons to call him the father of modern philosophy. It was one thing that characterizes modern philosophy, one thing that makes modern philosophy different from previous philosophy is the emphasis on epistemology. And you can certainly give Descartes much credit for that. The title of this book that I had you purchase, this textbook, Meditations on First Philosophy. So for the Greeks, for like Aristotle, he used that term first philosophy. He's referring to what we would call now metaphysics. So theories about the nature of reality. Think Plato's metaphysics, the idea of the forms. Everything that's absolutely real are the forms. That's what's really real. Everything else, all the physical world, is just a representation or a reflection or a shadow of that ultimate reality. That's a metaphysical theory. Now, in the modern period, when we get to Descartes, first philosophy for him is epistemology, theories of knowledge. How do you know what you know? What is the basis for your knowledge? And we talked about this last time. Descartes was a rationalist. During the modern period, there are these two major schools of epistemology. One is the rationalist, who believe that knowledge is based on reason, understanding, your ability to understand concepts, to draw conclusions and make judgments based on that understanding. Those are the rationalists, right? Knowledge based on reason, on rationality. On the flip side, on the other side of the coin, you've got the empiricists. They're going to say that no, knowledge is based on experience. You can't know anything unless you've had a direct experience through your senses, through your emotions. You don't know what love is till you felt it, right? You don't have a concept of it until you directly experienced it. So those are the two different schools of thought. And as I say, Descartes is a staunch rationalist, and we'll see that this is pretty apparent, not today, but probably by the time we get through with the second meditation, we'll see some of his arguments for this rationalist approach. But whether you're a rationalist or an empiricist, if you're a modern philosopher, right, these philosophers that were living during, the 1600s, 1700s, and into the 1800s, the focus tended to be on these questions about knowledge. How do you know what you know? I have Kant's name listed here. We talked about him maybe a little bit last time, and we might come back to him at the end when we get done with Descartes. But he's sort of a unique figure in modern philosophy. He's sort of in the middle. He's not a rationalist. He's not an empiricist. He tends to take both schools and kind of bring them together. So we'll talk more about him maybe later once we finish up with Descartes. But this is basically the gist of it. There's a lot more to modern philosophy than that, but one major feature of it, one way to think about it, is this change of focus. And why? Why was there this change of focus? Well, we believe it's pretty apparent that it had a lot to do with some of the historical things that were going on, some of the historical changes, namely the scientific revolution. Some of the ways that we thought of the world, the way that we understood the world was completely transformed, and you might even say turned upside down during the scientific revolution. During the late 1500s, early 1600s, you get figures like Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and they're completely overthrowing the old view of the world, the way the world used to appear to the Greeks. No longer is the earth in the center. Now it's a heliocentric view of the universe that dominates. This is Copernicus who introduces this concept. And you get Kepler. Remember that we were talking about this last time. The Greeks thought that all the planets moved in perfect circles around the earth. That view is questioned by Kepler. And then finally you get to Galileo, who is able to improve the telescope to such a degree that he's able to see the surface of the moon. And instead of seeing this perfectly smooth surface, this divine object, which he was expecting, he sees all these craters and desolation, a desert up on the moon's surface. So all of these conceptions of the universe were being overturned, and philosophy had to respond. And this is the beginning of the development of what we now call the modern scientific method. People like Descartes, Francis Bacon, all these early modern philosophers helped set the foundation in place for the development of modern science. Also, we mentioned at the end of class last time Martin Luther, and who was given much responsibility, maybe a little too much, for beginning the Protestant Revolution. So not only was the church being attacked by scientists, but it was also being attacked in a spiritual way. So remember, science and religion, before the scientific revolution, science and religion were seen as sort of two sides to the same coin. Or maybe that's not even a good way of putting it. It was sort of like science was a part of religion. It was always done in the context of religion. The idea is that God created nature, so if you're studying nature, in a certain sense, you're studying God. And so the two went hand in hand. It's with people like Descartes that we start to get a split. These two things are separated. Doing religion, doing science are separate. And a lot of this, again, has to do with people like Kepler, Galileo. It's not only the scientists who are attacking the authority of the church, though. It's other people, too, like Martin Luther, who was not a scientist. He was more of a spiritual man. He was a bishop. No, not a bishop. He was just a friar. But he challenged the authority of the church and some of the teachings of the church that he didn't find in Scripture. So, things about how, you could buy your way into heaven, indulgences. We talked a little bit about this last time. The fact that only the priest could speak to God. You couldn't pray to God directly. You had to go through the priest, through the Pope, or through the bishops to communicate with God. You weren't allowed to read the scripture. Martin Luther is the first to translate the Bible into a common language that just your average person could read. So all of these were things that went against the church's teachings. And this might explain why the focus is now on epistemology. That's these philosophers, like Descartes, he's living during all these changes. And this is very unsettling for someone like him. So before he starts making all these claims about the way things are, before he starts making all these metaphysical assertions, he wants to make sure he even knows anything. And how can he know anything? And what's the basis for his knowledge? So the focus, it seems to be for Descartes, and for really the rest of the moderns, is this question about knowledge. And how can I ever be certain of anything? So when we look to the first meditation, you have to keep this in mind. You have to understand what Descartes was living through, the time period that he was living through, or else I find that students, if they just approach this outside of that understanding, they tend to see Descartes as kind of crazy. Why is he so doubtful? Why is he such a skeptic? You're going to see in this first meditation, his whole aim in this first meditation is to pretty much doubt everything. The subtitle, meditation 1, is concerning those things that can be called into doubt. And so if you don't understand, again, he's living in a very tumultuous time for science. You might imagine if you, let's say you went to school to study something, like you went to go study math, or you went to go study, even better yet, you went to medical school to become a surgeon, or you wanted to become a lawyer, so you went to law school. And let's say you worked really hard, you dedicated a long part of your life to studying this discipline, and then finally you get your degree, and you're able to practice law or be a surgeon or whatever it is, but the day you get your degree, whatever your science is, they change all the rules. And all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, the way we were doing surgery before was totally wrong. It was unsafe. There's a better way that's safe. So that degree you just got, it totally does, it no longer counts. If you want to be a surgeon, you got to go back to school and start over again. I mean, imagine how disappointed you would be, how angry you would be, right? You'd be pretty pissed off. But let's say you really wanted to be a surgeon and you were like determined, and you're all like, man, fine, I guess I'm gonna have to go back and learn this new technique. You still might be hesitant, even if your dream was to be a surgeon. Why might you hesitate? What might you be afraid that might happen if you went back to school again and got your degree a second time? What might happen again? So you get a degree, like you're a biologist and you learn all the latest biology. Jonathan Reyes, it would be the same problem. Yeah, like what? What do you mean? So you go to school again, you get another degree, and then it might change again, This is basically the situation that Descartes is in, but it's even worse. It's on a much universal level, on a universal scale. It's not just that biology has changed, or chemistry has changed, or the legal system has changed. Everything has changed. Everything that they once believed about the universe has been basically turned upside down on its head. And so Descartes, let's just assume he's sincere. He wants to know. He wants to have knowledge. He wants to be a philosopher. He's a lover of wisdom. He wants truth. But he's worried. He's like, I don't want to continue doing philosophy, base it on some false assumptions, and then end up having it all be destroyed. Imagine, remember we were talking about Ptolemy last time. The Ptolemaic model of the universe that assumed Earth was in the middle. Imagine how much time and effort that Ptolemy, this astronomer, put into this model. Hours and hours of staying up at night, looking at the night sky, taking measurements, doing these math problems, trying to figure out how many cycles or epicycles there were. And all for what? So we can look at it and laugh now? Haha, how silly. He was so wrong. So Descartes does not want to fall prey to that same trap. He wants to make sure that if he's going to have a science, if he's going to have a philosophy, that it's going to be on some solid foundation. So he thinks the way that he should do this, the way to proceed, is to start new, to start afresh. He wants to wipe the slate clean, completely demolish all of his old beliefs, and then find some bedrock foundation that he can build truth upon. And so this is the beginning, as I said, of the modern scientific method with people like Descartes, Francis Bacon. But let's go ahead and read his opening lines here. This is on page 13 of our textbook. Meditation 1, concerning those things that can be called into doubt. Let's see how he starts off. He basically kind of says what I just said, but he sort of says it in his own words. He tells us, several years have now passed since I first realized how numerous were the false opinions that in my youth I had taken to be true, and thus how doubtful were all those that I had subsequently built upon them. Thus I realized that once in my life I had to raise everything to the ground. That's R-A-Z-E, so it's not raise up, but like demolish. I had to raise everything to the ground and begin again from the original foundations, if I wanted to establish anything firm and lasting in the sciences. But the task seemed enormous, and I was waiting until I reached a point in my life that was so timely that no more suitable time for undertaking these plans of action would come to pass. For this reason, I procrastinated for so long that I would henceforth be at fault were I to waste the time that remains for carrying out the project by brooding over it. Accordingly, I have today suitably freed my mind of all cares, secured for myself a period of leisurely tranquility, and am withdrawing into solitude. At last, I will apply myself earnestly and wholeheartedly, unreservedly, to this general demolition of my opinions. And I got to say, I'm not a big fan of this translation of Descartes. I think it's actually more complicated and wordy than it needs to be. There's much more simple, straightforward translations. I just picked this book because it was the cheapest version I could find, so just to help the students out financially. But I think this is one of the reasons, that last sentence. I'm going to apply myself earnestly and unreservedly to the general demolition of my opinions. I think that that's actually much weaker than it should be. Other translations have it something like, I'm going to apply myself to the absolute annihilation of all my previous beliefs. I'm going to destroy everything that I used to believe. It turned out to be based on faulty premises. All this stuff that I thought about the universe was wrong, so I've got to start over, and I'm just going to sort of doubt again. I'm going to doubt everything, right? I'm going to doubt everything that I can possibly doubt. So how do I do this? Descartes pondering his method here. He's like, how am I going to go about doing this? Can I sit here and survey all of my beliefs and look at my beliefs one by one? Maybe I'll sit down and make a checklist and just write down everything I believe and just look at every belief one by one and try to find some reason to doubt it. Okay, well, that could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Throw that off the list. Okay, how about this one? That's probably wrong, or it could be wrong. Throw that off the list. He doesn't seem to think that method would work. Why not? Let's say you were trying to doubt all your beliefs, but you had to find a reason for doubting them. Why wouldn't it work that way? Why couldn't you just sit down and write down everything you believed? What sort of problems would you run into?
I mean, there could be some things that you believe that you don't. Like that you just don't think about. Like,
right.
You've learned a lot. If you've learned a lot, there's certain things that you knowledges that have different applications to different things that you just don't think about on the daily. So
you might miss a few, right?
Doesn't he like categorize it like if something is based off of like some application that doesn't have any concrete or like indisputable value or indisputable fact, then he'll just like take that off the table. So like
right.
stuff like mathematics
Right.
and
Yeah, we're gonna get to that in just a second, because like that, he gets to that in the very next paragraph. He basically sets the standard for himself that, look, if it's not absolutely certain, I'm gonna throw it off the table. And as you sort of hint, that kind of doesn't leave a whole lot. There's like math and a few other things, right? Um, but yeah, I think the thing you bring up, and I don't really think, maybe I missed it, but I don't think he really brings that up. But that definitely is a problem. There's things that you might forget. Like you believe that you're sitting here right now. You believe that today is Thursday. There's all these things you believe that are like completely trivial, but you believe them, and you might leave those off the list. Okay, so that's one problem. Like, you might not think of certain things and certain like applications of certain beliefs, and so that's one problem you might face. The one that he mentions is this might go on forever. You don't have enough time for this. There's so many beliefs. In fact, you might argue that your beliefs are infinite, because not only do you believe that today is Thursday, you also believe that tomorrow will be Friday, and you believe that the day after that will be Saturday. And you believe the day after that will be Sunday, and then after that's Monday, and then Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then Thursday again, and then it keeps going. So, it depends on how you think about beliefs, but you might argue that your beliefs are, in a sense, infinite, at least possibly. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, they are finite. There's surely a lot of them. So even if you could plug some computer into your brain and it could scan all your beliefs and print them out on a piece of paper, so you had a checklist of everything you believed, it would certainly be a very, very long list. So it would take forever to get through it. So he says, that's not going to work. I can't go through all of my beliefs. So I've got to have a criteria. He says, my criteria is if it's possible to doubt it, I'm going to doubt it. But that's still going to not help me a whole lot. That doesn't narrow everything down. So how might I narrow it down? How might I make this method a little bit more easy? Well, let's read and see what he says. Maybe that'll give you a better idea of how he proceeds. He says, so to bring this about, right, to destroy all my beliefs, to wipe the slate clean and start over, he says, to bring that about, I need not show that all my opinions are false, which is perhaps something I could never accomplish. But reason now persuades me that I should withhold my assent no less carefully from opinions that are not completely certain and indubitable than I would from those that are patently false. And for this reason, it will suffice for the rejection of all these opinions if I find in each of them some reason for doubt. Nor, therefore, need I survey each opinion individually, a task that would be endless. Rather, because undermining the foundations will cause whatever's been built upon them to crumble of its own accord, I will attack straight away those principles which supported everything I once believed. Okay, so what's he saying there? First he's saying kind of what Michael was saying. Look, I'm going to have this high standard for knowledge, right? Like, some things are obviously false. Some things are patently false. They're just absurd. There's no way you can believe them. Like that a circle is square or that a square is circle. That just doesn't even make sense. It's false, obviously. But there are some things that might be wrong, that might possibly be wrong. And he's going to treat those the same. He's going to say, if I could possibly doubt it, I'm going to doubt it. I'm going to treat it as if it were absurd. But in order to destroy all my beliefs, I need to, instead of looking at all of them, I need to zero in on some particular types of beliefs. Some beliefs are not as important as others, I guess he seems to be saying. So what's he going to do? I'll read that last sentence again, and hopefully maybe you can translate it for me in modern vernacular. He's common vernacular. He says, I don't have to survey each opinion individually. That task would be endless. Rather, because undermining the foundations will cause whatever's been built upon them to crumble, I will attack those principles which supported everything else I once believed. So what's he going to do? He's not going to look at all of his beliefs and attack them one by one. What's he going to start? How's he going to start? What's he going to do?
Start with what he believes is certain.
Well, not the certain. Well, maybe. I mean, I think you're on the right track, but so let me read the sentence again. Undermining the foundations will cause whatever's been built upon them to crumble. So I'll attack straight away those principles which supported everything else I once believed. So you have a lot of things you believe. For instance, you believe that you're watching a lecture on Zoom. That you're taking part, participating in a philosophy class. You believe that. Okay, is that a foundational belief of yours? Do other beliefs depend on that?
No.
Not really. Maybe a few, but why do you believe that? Why do you believe that you're here watching me on Zoom? Why do you believe that I'm actually talking here?
I feel like it's because if you know you have your internet connection is working, you log into the Zoom app.
Right.
I can see the screen, I can see your face, and your words is actually your mouth. And then it gives me the foundation that I know that I'm in the class physically.
Right. So you believe in things like the internet. You believe that there's things called satellites that send signals of images across, these, and you believe because you see, and that's that was the answer I was looking for. But you gave maybe even a better answer, you might argue, with even more reasons to back it up. But ultimately, it's sort of perceptions, right? You see me. And so your belief in your senses, your belief that your senses are telling you, what's really there, is your basis for believing that I'm talking and I'm, discussing Descartes or whatever. Okay. So Descartes is not going to look at everything you believe, like the fact that you believe you're sitting down, the fact that you believe that, today's Thursday. That would just take forever. There's too many of those kind of beliefs. So instead, he's going to attack the foundations of those beliefs. So your foundations, the reasons behind them. And if you attack the foundations, and you can somehow show that the foundations are faulty, then anything based on those foundations is also doubtful. It's also faulty, right? So that's the way he's going to proceed, right? And so we mentioned the senses, and that's his first target. He says, well, most of the things that I take to be true and most true, I primarily learned through the senses. And so what about the senses? Let's apply this criteria. Remember, he says, if it's possible to doubt it, I'm going to doubt it. That's a pretty high standard, by the way, for knowledge, a very high standard. His criteria is pretty high. If it's possible to doubt it, going to doubt it. If it's not absolutely certain, I'm going to treat it as false. So what about the senses? Are we absolutely certain in our senses? Is it possible that you're wrong for believing? Yeah. Maybe what? Like what could possibly be true? I mean, isn't it the case that I'm sitting here talking about Descartes? I mean, I believe it. You probably believe it too. But is it possible maybe that it's not really happening?
I mean, I remember I know he talked eventually. I don't know if I'm skipping ahead, but he eventually talks about dreams.
Right. Well, that's the next step. I mean, you aren't really jumping ahead. That's pretty much the next step. It takes him a second to get there because he kind of holds on to the senses for just a second because he's like, well, come on, like our senses do deceive us occasionally, right? Our senses, like when do our senses deceive us?
It's like when you see somebody, like I know he brings another example he brings up instead of dreams. It's like when you think you see something somebody you recognize, and then you get close and you realize it's not them, or you think you hear something. Like when I guess like when you're listening to music and you're trying to listen to the words, to the lyrics, and then you think you hear something, but then we actually read the lyrics. You're like, okay, I got
that something different. Right. It happens all the time. You've been singing it the wrong way for like years, and then you're like, oh, that's what they say. Jeez. Yeah, so exactly. He brings up examples like that. He's like, when someone's really far away, you might think it's your buddy, but then when they get closer, it just kind of looked like him from far away, but it's not the same guy. But then he's sort of like, but wait a minute, those are just like exceptions. Those are just the weird cases, right? Surely I can't doubt that I'm sitting here writing this essay, but then he gets to the dreams, right? So let's read it. Let's read this little short paragraph where he's kind of holding on to the senses for a second, but then he jumps into the dream world, sort of, the dream world talk. This is pretty much where I left off. It's on page 14. He says, perhaps even though the senses sometimes deceive us when it's a question of very small and distant things, still there are many other matters concerning which one simply cannot doubt, even though they're derived from the very same senses. For example, that I'm sitting here next to the fire wearing my winter dressing gown, that I'm holding this sheet of paper in my hands, and the like. But on what grounds could one deny that these hands and this entire body are mine? Unless perhaps I were to liken myself to the insane, whose brains are impaired by such an unrelenting vapor of black bile that they steadfastly insist they're kings when they're paupers. So in other words, he's like, I'm not nuts, I'm not crazy. So like, yeah, sure, every once in a while I see something that's not there. You know, we're all familiar with optical illusions. Maybe you've been on the highway on a hot sunny day and you see water on the road because of the refraction of the light. And then there's no water on the road. It's the humidity and the light, you know, refracting. But those are special cases. Those are special, you know. But then, and I think was it Michael that jumped in with the dreams? Yeah, it's like, but then he's like, but wait a minute. Sometimes I dream and I don't know I'm dreaming, right? Sometimes I have these dreams that are really fantastical and they're like obviously a dream. But there's sometimes when like I just have a normal everyday experience. Anybody ever have a dream like that where like I used to have dreams where actually I went to work and I worked a shift at my job. I would always get angry when I woke up from those dreams. I felt like maybe they should pay me overtime for, you know, for working. Yeah, but it was just a totally I mean, sometimes your dreams are wacky, right? You know, like you just some talking dog, you know, hey, where's the grocery store? Oh, it's just that way. Yeah. Even then I'm bad. Like I don't even know I'm dreaming until after I wake up. And then I'm like, that was weird. A talking dog. But he says, so sometimes, you know, we're dreaming and we don't know it. Maybe we're dreaming right now and we don't know it. You know, so this is where, you know, this is the next paragraph. He says, you know, maybe I can trust my senses, but wait a minute, that would be well and good were I not a man who is accustomed to sleeping at night and to experiencing in my dreams the very same things, or now and then even less plausible things, as these insane people experience when they're awake. How often does my evening slumber persuade me of such ordinary things as these? That I'm here, clothed in my dressing gown, seated next to the fireplace, when in fact I'm lying undressed in bed. But right now my eyes are certainly wide awake when I gaze upon this sheet of paper. This head which I'm shaking is not heavy with sleep. I extend this hand consciously and deliberately, and I feel it. Such things would not be so distinct for someone who is asleep, as if I did not recall having been deceived on other occasions, even by similar thoughts in my dreams. And as I consider these matters more carefully, I see so plainly that there are no definitive signs by which to distinguish being awake from being asleep. And as a result, I'm becoming quite dizzy. And this dizziness nearly convinces me that I am asleep. So now he's starting to confuse himself. He's like, geez, he's like this Taoist, Chuangzi. If you ever read the book of Chuangzi, he's one of my favorite Taoist sages. There's a famous passage where he falls asleep next to the river meditating. And while he's asleep, he has a dream that he's a butterfly. But during the dream, he forgets everything about himself. He's just a butterfly. He forgets his past, everything about the world, and he's just a butterfly. But then he wakes up and he's shaken. He's like, well, wait a minute. Am I Shuangzu dreaming that I'm a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming that I'm Shuangzu? Like, how do I know which is which? You know, what's real and what's not? And so Descartes is in a similar pickle. You know, he's like, well, come on, you know, like I'm not dreaming right now. It just feels like I'm awake. Does it feel like you're dreaming right now? I mean, just come on. But haven't you felt that way in sleep? Like when you're dreaming, you feel like you're actually awake. So Descartes says, how do I know that the whole world, my whole life, that everything is not a dream? Right? And so he entertains this, I guess you might call it a thought experiment, but really he's just sort of making it hard on himself. He says, look, if it's possible to doubt it, I'm going to doubt it. So I'm going to doubt that anything's real. Maybe I'm living a dream. Maybe my whole life is a dream. It's all just an image. It's all just pictures in my head. But then he says, well, let's just say it is a dream world. Does that mean that nothing is real? And he hesitates. He says, nah, even if, let's just say for the sake of argument, that everything's a dream. Everything I've ever experienced is all just a dream in my head. I've never actually been awake. It's all just a dream. Wouldn't there still be something that's real? Like the dream's real. I'm having a dream. So dreams exist. My dream is existing. But what's in a dream? He says that there are images. They're like painted. There's no cameras back in the 1600s. There's no animation. There's no film. So he's just picturing. He's like, dreams are like paintings, like in a museum, but they move. Moving paintings. All right. So what are paintings made of? They're made of paint. But what's paint? What does paint do to a canvas? It adds what? What are images made of? Any art majors in here? What are the elements that you use to make images with?
Color.
Color, that's the first one that kind of jumps out, colors. So he says, well, maybe I'm having a dream, but I'm seeing things and they got colors, so color is real. They might just be dream colors, but they're colors nonetheless. Dream green and real green are still green. So green exists. What else?
Shapes.
Good, shapes. Right, so shapes exist, right? I might have a dream triangle or an actual triangle, but it's still got three sides and the angle's still up to 180 degrees. It's still, all the things that are true of triangles are still true, whether or not it's a dream or not a dream. So I could still know colors. I could still know shapes. Anything else? Somebody said it, I think. What was it? I didn't hear it. Hint, hint. No one else wants to guess?
I was gonna say maybe certain colors can evoke certain emotions, but I don't know if that's necessarily.
I would say, well, yes, but even if that's not true, which it certainly, I think there's a lot of evidence it is true. But even if that weren't true, don't you have emotions? So I guess I'll put the word feelings because maybe we could use that to sort of take care of both emotions and physical touch. So, so I can feel, I still have the sensation of touch, and I have actual emotions as well. Like I would still have fear, hate, love, like those exist, whether they're dream love or dream fear, they're still fear. So good, okay. What else? Somebody said sounds. Good, sounds. Sounds would exist. Maybe just dream sounds, but they're still sounds. What else? We're forgetting some of this. Like what else? We got five senses, don't we? We've got sight. We got touch. We got
taste.
Hearing. Taste. Did you say taste? Is that what you said?
Yeah, taste.
Yeah, taste. I've never tasted anything in an actual dream, but I've certainly tasted things in this, like whatever this is. Maybe this is a dream world, but in this dream world, there's flavors. So tastes exist. Whether they're dream tastes or not, taste exists. Anything else are we forgetting?
Smell.
Smells. Okay, good. Good old smells. Can't forget the nose. And there's one thing you'll never get. I'll have to add it to the list myself.
Can you start from the beginning? I missed half the lecture.
Okay, wait a minute. You want me to start from the very beginning? I'm recording this, and you can rewatch it on YouTube. I'm not going to start from the very. I'm not going to start from the beginning of the lecture. If you can't see the screen, I'm sharing a screen with a list of all these things. Okay.
I don't see that. I don't see.
So I'll read them again. Okay. And let me add one more to the list. Okay. So you got colors, shapes, feelings. Whether you're talking about emotions or actual.
What was the first one? What was the first one?
Colors, shapes, feelings.
Feelings.
Yeah, like don't you still have emotions? Aren't emotions real? Like whether or not it's dream anger or
you
dream.
mean like a wet dream?
Like a wet dream? Yes, I suppose. Yeah, horny is a feeling, right? Or you're talking about actual feeling, like texture, like you felt something, like friction or whatever. Yeah, I mean, like, look, even if life is a dream, let's just say everything that you've ever experienced is a dream. He's arguing here that you'd still have all this stuff. All these components would still be real. Colors would still be real. You know, they'd be just in your mind, but they'd still exist. Red would still exist. Shapes would just be in your mind, but they'd still be shapes. And then at the very end, okay, extension. Look, I'm not testing you on this. You don't have to like
Wait, wait,
write
wait,
out.
wait,
Yeah,
wait,
yeah,
wait,
yeah.
wait, wait, wait. What class is this again?
Jesus. This is introduction to
This is for
philosophy. Look.
philosophy.
If you don't know what's going on or where you're at right now, don't take it out on all the other students.
Man, shut up. I just asked the question. I thought this was sex ed.
Look, you don't even this. You think this is sex ed? You are completely in the wrong place. This is Thursday afternoon from
You
one.
talking about
from,
being horny and shit. I just asked the question. I didn't know what
You're,
the fuck
okay, you're the one that brought up wet dreams, okay? I had no idea why you're bringing up wet dreams. I'm trying to bring it back. I'm trying to bring it back to
Don't get no
Descartes.
attitude with me because you don't get no pussy.
Are you serious, man? Look, dude, you were making a big distraction here in class, man. So I'm just gonna have to keep you on mute or
Fuck
something.
your class, nigga. Suck my dick. Eat my dick off my body, bitch.
Jesus Christ, man. I'm sorry about that, guys. Look, I'm really sorry about that, guys. I don't know what that guy's deal was. I don't know how he ended up in this class. I mean, how do you end up in the wrong class? What a moron, you know? Jesus Christ. Sounds like he's not getting any. Anyway, jeez, please. So, I'm just trying not to let this get to me, man. But geez, I'm just so sick of people's attitudes, man. I mean, ugh. All right, guys. Sorry to take it out on you, but let's try to get through this. We're back in our dream world, okay? We're not doing sex ed. Hope everybody else knows that we're not doing sex ed. If you think you're in sex ed, let me know. Okay, cool. Everybody else knows we're in Intro to Philosophy. Great, awesome. So, back to Descartes. Okay, the last thing that I put here on the list is extension, right? So extension, this is a word that needs explanation because you're probably thinking extension. What's he talking about? Like extend, like time, like duration. When these modern philosophers, whenever they use this term extension, they're typically talking about depth. So something has depth, something has takes up space, and this sort of thing. So that's what they mean by extension. So he's going to say in a dream world, right? So colors would be real, shapes would be real, feelings, sounds, all that stuff would be real. Whether or not it's imaginary or whether or not it's actual is irrelevant for him. Things that are true about these would still be true, right? Red would still look red. The triangle would still have three sides, etc. What else though? Do you think that like math, like things about math would still be true? Like if everything was a dream, do you think that 2 + 2 would still equal 4? You think, like all the things that are true about geometry, would that still be true? What do you think?
Could you repeat that one more time?
So if like let's say we're still in so Ariana, her response, let me hold on and pause here. So the question, I'll ask it again and then I'll give you Ariana's response, and I'll have to sort of maybe clarify again. The question was, so again, we're still imagining that everything's a dream. We're going along with Descartes for the sake of argument. So maybe there are no actual colors, there's just dream colors, but those would still be real. But the question is, what about math? Would all the things that are true about math still be true if everything was a dream? Would 2 + 2 still be 4?
I guess because she said it because it's physical, and I'm like, when you bring up physical, and then I guess the only thing that the closest would be like actual like physics.
Yeah, well, see,
but then that's based on, but then what you're doing, the physical might be correct, but the numbers are still technically abstract. They're just things that we've made up.
Well, that's not what Descartes going to say. He's going to say like that. Look, math is just true whether or not. In fact, and that's why I'm kind of confused with her answer that yes, they're true because it's physical. At this point, he's doubting the physical. He's saying that there might not be a physical, that everything might be in a mind, that it all might be a dream. But so the physical's not there. But he would argue math is still true. It's like that 2 + 2 would still be 4. It might not apply to something physical, right? Like, so you might not be able to measure something. Like, you might not be able to say, oh, that building is 2 by 2 miles long, really big ass building, right? You couldn't say that because there would be no building. But you would say, my image in my mind of the building is 2 miles by 2 miles. And so the area would still be 2 times 2, which would be 4. So he's going to argue that even if there aren't any physical things, that math would still be true.
I feel like that's him trying to hold on to that part of himself that, because ultimately, that's a word. We can what if we decided that what was 5 was 2? You know, I know it sounds weird because we've been ingrained in math for so long, but it's just like if you hear a different word and something in a different language, and it means something different. Like 4 in Japan.
Well, you're talking about how we refer to something, okay? So you could refer to a unit as something else. So whether you call it 1 or whether you call it uno, whether you call it 2 or whether you call it dos, but if you have some sort of alternate math where 5 actually equals 2, and all this sort of thing. Well, maybe there are some alternative maths like that. You've got some weird.
I only say that because he's talking about if you can't definitively prove, because you said everything could be a dream. I've read some of him before. I might be getting ahead. He talks about God and devils and stuff like that. But I'll get back.
Well, at this point, he doesn't think he can, he's going to get to the point where you're at, right? He's going to get to the point where he's going to say, how do I even know 2 + 2 = 4? How do I even know anything? Even math could be wrong. But he doesn't seem to think that follows in the dream world yet, right? He still seems to think, look, in a dream world, 2 + 2 would still be 4. And I think he's basing this, and maybe this is why Arianas said because it's physical. It's not that it's physical, it has to do with the relationship between shapes. So geometry will say things about ratios between angles, between sides of the shape. And so if we're going to say that shapes are real, regardless of whether they're dream shapes or non-dream shapes, then we're going to have to say that things about shapes are true. So that, the angles within inside a triangle are going to add up to 180, etc.
Cool.
So he's going to say that, but like you said, he's going to start bringing up God, and eventually we're going to get to this evil genius, and he's going to say, now, let's just imagine it's not a dream, but it's even worse, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, when she says physical, I guess if we're sticking to the dream world, then I guess it's physical because you can still feel something in the dream. Or you can only smell something that's physical. You can only taste.
And if it's physical, I guess you can measure it. Yeah, Ariana, you want to jump in?
I was saying, when I was saying physical, I was more meaning because the last thing you had said was geometry. I wouldn't necessarily agree that every kind of math is true if we're in a dream world, but I was meaning geometry and architecture, things that are physical, and if we were in a dream, they would still be things that we could visually see and imagine. So things like imaginary numbers or certain types of algebra where you're just trying to turn letters into numbers and stuff like that, I can understand how that'd be something you need to question.
Yeah.
But
and that was still controversial, right? The imaginary numbers were still really controversial during this time period. So I think Descartes might be with you on what you just said. He might say, well, maybe those aren't, but he would probably say, if you ever taken a class in trigonometry and all these relationships between angles inside of a triangle and how to derive sine and cosine, a lot of that stuff we got from Descartes. And so he's going to say, look, if a triangle exists, whether it's a dream triangle or not, there are mathematical truths about it. There are, ratios that are true about it, etc. So, but he's going to say, look, but what if, right? what if it was even worse than a dream world? What if there was actually an evil genius? So it depends on the translation you get. Some translations have evil demon, right? But I guess the word in Latin is daemon, but in our translations, evil genius. So he comes up with this hypothesis. He says, well, what if there's this crazy evil demon who's trying to trick me about everything? And so that everything I believe about anything is actually false. Well, if that's the case, then he thinks all this stuff is off the table, right? He thinks all this stuff is gone, right? So colors could be false, and even now we're to where Michael's at, maybe even 2 is 5, and we don't even know it. We think that 2 + 2 = 4, but there's actually some other number like 5, and this evil genius is tricking me to think otherwise. And if that's the case, he's basically now committed himself to this global skepticism. And so this is at the very end of the first meditation. Let me go ahead and read the last paragraph here, and then we'll kind of discuss the problem. So he says, let's assume then, for the sake of argument, I kind of skipped over the dreaming stuff, right? So let's go to the bottom of page 16. He says, I will suppose that it not a supremely good God, the source of truth, but rather an evil genius, supremely powerful and clever, has directed his entire effort at deceiving me. I will regard the heavens, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things as nothing but the bedeviling hoaxes of my dreams, with which he lays snares for my credulity. I will regard myself as not having hands, or eyes, or flesh, or blood, or any senses, but as nevertheless falsely believing that I possess all these things. I will remain resolute and steadfast in this meditation, and even if it is not within my power to know anything true, it is certainly within my power to take care resolutely to withhold my assent to what is false, lest this deceiver, however powerful, however clever he may be, have any effect on me. But this undertaking is arduous, and a certain laziness brings me back to my customary way of living. I'm not unlike a prisoner who enjoyed an imaginary freedom during his sleep, but when he later begins to suspect that he's dreaming, he fears being awakened, and he nonchalantly conspires with these pleasant illusions. In just the same way, I fall back of my own accord into my old opinions and dread being awakened, lest the toilsome wakefulness which follows upon a peaceful rest must be spent thenceforward not in the light, but amongst the inextricable shadows of the difficulties now brought forward, right? So quite a lot of difficulties if he's right about this, right? If he's right about, what follows from this hypothesis. And I want to emphasize it is a hypothesis. I think a lot of students get confused about this. They think that Descartes actually believes in an evil genius. He never believed there was an evil genius. He's just making himself have a really high standard for knowledge. So you say, look, until I can somehow disprove this hypothesis, which he's going to get to, he thinks he can somehow disprove it. But until then, he's got to pretty much commit himself to this absolute skepticism. And so in a certain sense, he's accomplished his first goal that he set out at the beginning. He wants to demolish all his previous beliefs. This evil genius hypothesis does that. But now that he's a skeptic, now that he's doubting everything, he wants to get back to the world. He wants to know something. And how's he going to do this? Well, we'll find out later. We'll have to probably talk about this more next time. But one reason or one way that he thinks he can defeat this hypothesis and somehow show that this hypothesis of an evil genius is impossible is by somehow proving that God exists. So he thinks if I prove that God exists, that will disprove this evil genius hypothesis. Why do you think there's a connection between the two? He'll explain later on, but just think about it. Why does one have to do with the other? Why would proving that God exists disprove that there's an evil genius?
Isn't it because of I think it's because of the concept that God isn't evil.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, good. He's assuming a good God, right? He's assuming, look, so God is good, God's perfect. And if God's perfect and all this great stuff and infinite, he wouldn't be evil. He would be good. And so a good deity wouldn't allow the evil genius to constantly deceive me about everything, making me believe that things were true when they're actually false, making me believe that 2 + 2 is 4 when it's some other number. Right, good. So we won't get to that until the third meditation. So probably towards the end of class next time, you know, we're going to wrap up the second meditation, and then we'll move on to the third. But that's not where he starts, right? He says, well, wait a minute. I'm kind of at the point now where I'm doubting everything, but am I really doubting everything? In a certain sense, he says, there's one thing that I could never doubt, ever, no matter what, even if the evil genius were true. And it's something that we didn't put on our list, right? It's not here on the list. What's that?
I was gonna say the thing he can't doubt is the fact that he doubts.
Right, good. And that really leads to him, you know, affirming his own existence. This Latin phrase that I have written here, cogito ergo sum, that translates roughly as I think, therefore I am. So he's going to say, we'll see this when we get to the second meditation, he's going to argue, well, geez, even if I'm doubting, and even if there's an evil genius and make me doubt everything, I have to be here to be deceived. So even if he is deceiving me, I at least know that's the one thing that's true, my existence. I exist, I am, and it's from that certainty that he's going to build all his other knowledge. Right, so that's the starting point, and eventually he thinks that's going to get him to this knowledge of God. That he's going to know that because I exist and I'm the type of being that has knowledge of this other being, God. Now he's going to give some proofs for, or what he thinks of as proofs for the existence of God. Of course, there's a lot of criticism of these proofs. You can imagine. So we'll have to go over some of the criticisms, but that's basically where this is headed, right? He doesn't want to be a skeptic. He wants to be a rationalist. I can know things. I just have to follow reason, have to follow mathematical reasoning, certainty, and I'm good. But he's got to get rid of this hypothesis. He's got to defeat the evil genius, and he thinks he can do it, right? And a good starting point is his self-certainty. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That was it. That's the second meditation. Man, we didn't get much of a turnout, and it looks like somebody showed up that wasn't supposed to show up. I'm gonna have to figure out who the heck that guy was, and I don't know what I'm gonna do about that, but that was pretty offensive, man. Like, what a dick. Like, I don't understand why he thought that was even cool, dude. Maybe I was giving him some attitude, but you don't come into some freaking class and like just interrupt some lecture and just, I mean, come on, man. Have better sense. Anyway, I'm rambling. So did anybody have anything to say or any questions about anything? I know some of you got here late, so you might not have heard some of my announcements at the beginning, but I'll stick around for a little bit. If you want to leave now, you're free to go. You know, it's class dismissed. You know, have a good weekend, but I'll leave the meeting open for just a little bit longer, just in case.
Why you talking shit about me, man?
What's that, Jared?
Yeah, why you talking about me?
Why are you, okay, who are you, man?
I'm new.
You're me. Okay, what's me? Are you enrolled in my class?
Yes, sir.
Okay, why are you interrupting my class and being offensive and insulting to me and not respecting your other students? I don't understand why are you doing this. That's why I'm talking about you.
Ain't you Mrs. Johnson?
Look, hold on a second, man. Let me pause this recording.